very, very bad. And by that point in time, the county finally decided it was time to do something about it. So they built the West Wing. Now, if you guys look in those packets that I gave you, it didn't copy really great, but there is an 1885 lithograph of what the building looked like before the West Wing was built. Now, as you're driving from Waynesburg out Rolling Meadows Road, the West Wing is the newer part of the building that kind of sits towards the back. That was built, they started building in 1886. It opened on May 7th of 1887. And it was designed to house between 40 and 60 inmates. Each floor had 12 rooms to house people. There was also a basement, and people were housed in the basement for various different reasons. But on the two main floors, looks like the rooms were probably designed to house 2 people per room. Again, I'm sure in the 1880s and 1890s they may have had a bit more in there than that because the population was still kind of up and down a lot. But the new West Wing, it introduced a lot of new features to the building. Like in 1887, that building had not 1 but 2 bathrooms with indoor plumbing. One on the first floor, one on the second floor. The first floor was designed to house male inmates. Second floor was designed to house female inmates. So if you're ever in the bathroom, the women's room downstairs, that's one of the original bathrooms. The upstairs bathroom is not in great shape, so it's kind of more of a maintenance area. We store tools and stuff in there to keep on the second floor, but that's also an original bathroom. Unfortunately, that room has been modified a lot over the years. It still has its original subway tile on the walls, but it's had so many holes drilled in it for this fixture, that fixture, that it doesn't look very good. Downstairs on the first floor, though, the subway tile is in pretty decent shape. So if you're over there, you're looking at subway tile that's pretty old. And also the drain pipes are the original 1880s drain pipes. Also above those bathrooms in the attic over the West Wing, which was never finished space, I've only been in there a handful of times, but there is a big lead water cistern that still sits up there that fed the water to those bathrooms. And it looks like, what I've been able to kind of piece together, it looks like the water source was in the basement of that part of the building, and they pumped it up to that cistern, and it gravity fed to the fixtures in those 2 bathrooms. But it's massive. It is massive. And at one point in time, there was also a bathroom facility behind the West Wing where the one log cabin is. In fact, anytime you dig in that area, you find floor tile from that bathroom facility. Mm-hmm. By 1900, overcrowding seems to have no longer really been an issue after that. The population hovers between like 40 and 50, which was ideal for that building. It looks like at that time period, most everyone was living in the West Wing. And the steward and his family, and by that point in time, I think they probably did have staff living in the front part of the building. And then the original inmate rooms in the original, or the 1861 wing, it looks like those, well, some of those were being used as an infirmary, and it looks like some of the others were probably being used as, like, I think there may have been a doctor's office in one. In fact, the room we have set up as a doctor's office now very possibly could have been a doctor's office then. But we think those rooms kind of in that back corner were probably being used for, I use the blanket term, services. I don't know exactly what, but I don't think people were living in them at that time. And that's kind of how it really kind of stayed stable from that point up until it closed. Now, by the time it closed, it had basically developed into a nursing home. The Curry Home was built in 1933, 1934, and it started taking some people in. And then in 1964, the 2 wings on either side of the Curry Home were opened. And when that opened, that kind of spelled the end of the poorhouse. Everybody over there, it seems like they moved over to the Curry Home, and that building sat closed. Now, they did, when the Curry Home, the original part of the Curry Home was finished in 34, they did go through the old poorhouse and do some upgrades. Like, they replaced some of the windows in that time period, like 1934, 1935. Like, the windows in the very, very front that are all single panes of glass, that's when those were put in. In fact, as we restored those windows, on the sides, when you take the sashes out, they actually have the shipping marks on them where they came on the W&W Railroad, which is really, really cool to see. So when we repaired those, we made sure to the shipping marks that survived
Yeah,
stayed. They also did a lot of wallpapering, some upgrades. That's also when that building was electrified for the first time. Mid 1930s is when it got electricity for the first time, which is really kind of late when you think about it for an institution, but that's when it was electrified. And then again, it opened, or the Curry Home opened in '64, and that's when the poorhouse closed. Now the museum took over in 1968. It sat empty for about 4 years. It looks like in that 4 years of just sitting empty, a lot of damage happened to the building, like not vandalism or anything like that, but it looks like a lot of the plaster and stuff may have come down at that time period. So you can see where it was repaired, and it's definitely more recent repairs, not older ones. And Josephine Denny had a lot to do with the initial opening of that building. And then over the course of the last few years, we've been fixing it up quite a bit. And again, I keep talking about windows because windows are always on my mind. That's our big project. There's about 150 in the building. We've fixed about 130. We've got 20 left to do. It's been 20 for about 6 months. Next week, I've got somebody coming in to help, and I'm going to start working on more windows. So that's about all I have. Are there any questions? Yes.
In my younger days, I did a little bit of exploring behind the museum, and I ran into an old graveyard.
Yes, so that is the Zimmer's Cemetery. And I can't remember whose property it's on, but I've never actually been up to it, but I think there's only a handful of marked stones there. But
Right.
yeah, it's right in the middle of Gulfview Manor now.
Okay.
Yep. That's why it's called Zimmer's Lane up through there. It's named after that family.
Okay.
Yep. Anybody else?
Yes. What was the criteria to be admitted? Poor, but how were they identified?
It really could be anything. People could drop you off. The directors of the poor could admit you. It really could be anything. There's no. I don't think there was standard criteria for that. Kind of the same as you see at some of the larger scale state hospitals. I mean, especially in the 19th century, which we have more records from the way more records from the 19th century than we do after 1900. But it legitimately could have been anything. Anything.
Could they drop themselves off, so to speak? Could they?
Yes, that actually did happen. We have a letter where this was from the 1930s when Francis Huffman was the steward, where he is writing to another poorhouse somewhere in Pennsylvania, where he's basically sending an inmate from Greene County to whatever county that was in. And in the letter, he basically alludes to the fact that this guy just kind of poorhouse hops. Like he's, and I think there were probably a lot of people like that, like traveling peddlers and stuff, they might be in this area for a while, live at the poorhouse. It seems like that happened.
I have a question that's off topic.
Yes.
I found, since the Genealogical Society digitized the Republicans,
Yes.
the audits from like the Elijah Adams, Adam Gordon, and William Cage era and onward are there. And it shows the produce, what was produced at the farm, and the number of inmates and the number of deaths, both indoor and outdoor paupers.
Yes.
And there was 1 year, and I should have looked before I came down here. I believe it was when Elijah Adams was still steward, that they listed the population at the end of the year was right around 90. But they had taken in like 642 in that year. And this is, so I'm guessing that these were sort of transient people.
I would imagine so.
Okay, and the second part of the question is, it lists both indoor and outdoor funeral expenses, including, purchasing caskets.
Yeah.
Are the outdoor paupers in the ledgers you have? I mean, somebody obviously tracked the expenses.
So in the admittance ledger we have, no, they are not. They're not in there at all. However, we have expense books. Now, we don't have any that show this kind of information prior to the 1920s. But in these expense books for each year, like I actually I think it was last winter, I looked through this through the Great Depression because I'm not making numbers up right now. I'm kind of making educated guesses on numbers, but generally speaking, like in the 1920s, let's say, you may only have 20 or 30 people on outdoor relief. The Great Depression, that exploded. You know, you might see 1 or 2 pages prior to that. When the Great Depression hit, you would see 10, 15, 20 pages of people on outdoor relief. And ask your question again, because I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, I was just.
Oh,
curious.
yes. You're asking about ledgers. So those expense reports they list the names of all the people that were on outdoor relief at that time. And I think it gives the township they're from. It doesn't give a lot of information, but it lists their names. And then in sections after that, it might say that, I'm going to use your name for an example, that Kevin Paul on outdoor relief, they paid a bill at William Jennings General Store for these kind of supplies. They do have very detailed expenses like that in there. And they do list names of people on outdoor relief, but we only have that from like the 20s through about 1940, give or take.
Yeah, so some of these funeral expenses that they're showing as outdoor paupers, the poor farm ate the cost, but the people aren't necessarily, I mean, this is the way I'm taking it, the people aren't necessarily buried there. Some would be, but some wouldn't be.
Yes, that is
Okay,
correct.
I just want to make sure.
That is correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, the admittance ledger we have, it goes from 1862 to 1940. I don't know where the records are after 1940. They're probably somewhere with the county still. But yeah, that admissions ledger, that's only people that actually lived in the building. And again, there were lots of people that rotated through. And unfortunately, like the way the ledger is, it's on 2 pages. It gives the name, age, what township they came from, who they were admitted by, and why they were admitted. Some of those entries are filled out completely. A lot of them are not. In fact, the column that's filled out the least is like the last column, like I'll refer to it as the final disposition, whether they were transferred or died. Most of those entries are left blank. Lots of admittance data, very, very little discharge data. You have some, but that's very incomplete. Any other questions? Please ask me lots of questions. I like answering
I'd just
questions.
like to go with a comment, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
When we moved from the old museum uptown
Mm-hmm.
and went down there, what really got us going, and you brought her name up, Josephine Denny,
Mm-hmm.
and she kicked in a bunch of bucks to
Yes.
help us get rolling, and so that's all I wanted
Can
to
I
say,
ask you a
just to
question?
remember her
Can I ask
some more.
you a question? Were you involved in when the museum moved out there?
Oh, yeah.
So were you in the building in before the museum moved in now?
Yeah.
What was left in there? Was there anything left in there?
No.
No, it was completely empty?
Nope.
Okay. I always
We
wondered
hauled
that.
a lot of things. I hauled a old Victoria player,
Mhm.
Edison type, I guess, and brought down the clock from Margaret Bell,
Mhm.
alarm system, but many other things. But and the rooms are all sadly.
Yeah. I always wondered that because like we have an inordinate number of roll top desks in that building,
Yes.
and they're very big and heavy to move. And I always wondered if some of them may have been left there.
I'll only add one other comment. Our largest project was the chinking of the brick,
Yes,
and quite expensive.
I believe that because that's
being picked up the tab.
there is a massive amount of brick
Yes,
there. A
okay.
massive amount of brick there.
Yeah.
I believe you had a question, Wayne?
Matt, could you relate us a story that I've heard a couple of times about what was the Almshouse, about the baby in the oven?
Yes. So I don't know an exact year on this. I have verified it with a descendant of that family. I'm not going to use any names, but there was a female inmate. I will say this though. I'd mentioned earlier a family of 9 idiots. She was part of that family, and again, idiots, their term, not mine. But she was a member of that family. This is information coming from the descendant who sent me this personally. She became pregnant with several illegitimate children there. And the story I always heard said it was one child. The story he told me, and again, this is coming from his family, said it was actually a set of twins. She became pregnant by a male inmate there and had a set of twins and placed them in the big brick oven. And they laid in that overnight and they cooked. Now, I can tell you that female inmate, in the ledger, it says she was insane. The story I like to think happened is that maybe her children died in the night and she put it in there to warm it up, but that's just kind of a happy presumption. But that did happen. And I don't know a lot of details. I don't know when it happened. Presumably in the late 1890s sometime. But yeah, that
Would that have been in the present kitchen that you're now?
the
The
so
one in the back?
the one in the back, yeah, with the brick oven. Yes. Yes.
Before we opened up, we had civil defense
Mhm.
stuff down in the dungeons, we called them.
Mhm.
Yeah, and had to clean all that out.
Oh yeah.
Food, eggs, dried eggs.
Oh my.
Yeah.
You should see how clean the dungeon is now. Like
Yeah.
we keep it
I need to
spotlessly
look at
clean.
that, yeah.
In fact, we're slowly getting rooms ready down there to be on display. Like you probably know the story that one of the rooms there at the very end of the dungeon was a cobbler shop.
Yeah,
We have it set up as a cobbler shop.
excellent.
So there's also a room down there. It's actually right next to the cobbler shop where if you look up at the rafters, there's nails and there's hand painted numbers above the nails. I don't know what those were. It really, really looks like that was a place to hang laundry bags. So I've set it up as a laundry room, and it just kind of makes sense that way. But definitely, you can tell just by the, I don't want to say font, but the way the numbers were painted up there that it was definitely long ago.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we have it set up as a laundry room. Do we know that? No, but it certainly feels like it might be right.
I'll ask a personal question. Do you still happen to have a set of bellows around?
A very, very big set?
Yes?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, we do. In fact, it's not done yet. It is largely set up, but I need to get a chimney hook up. The smokehouse behind the main building, that's a little
Yes.
square building.
Mhm.
It's never been used for anything, in my knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's a building that was designed to have fire in it. So we've set up a blacksmith shop in there. We have those
Okay.
bellows out
Yeah, I
there.
made that.
Oh, did you really? Yeah, there we still
Yeah.
have those.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Could I introduce us two?
Yes.
I'm Linda Morton, and this is my brother Jim.
Ah, hello.
And we date back to Josephine Denny days, and,
Ah, okay.
and when Robert Yoder's MD was curator of the Greene County Historical Society. Do you remember him?
Who was it?
Bob Yoder's.
Oh, yes.
And he was
Fine man. Yeah, we
He was
worked with him.
a friend of our families, and
Ah.
he recruited my younger sister and me when the museum was moving
Mhm.
from town out there. And I was tasked with washing glassware. And my younger sister,
God bless you.
and it was a kitchen. It just had a stove and a porcelain sink with, I think, just one drain board, an old-fashioned one.
Mhm.
And I had to boil my water on the stove, and he had a mixture of Tide and ammonia that he liked using on glassware. So I had to use that concoction and carefully wash all that. It was very heavy. I remember one pattern was cat's paw and block.
We still have that.
Yeah, I washed it.
Oh, God bless you, because I've helped wash some of that glassware, and the amount of it has only grown over the years.
Well, I don't remember exactly because I was still a teenager or just maybe gone the first year of college. So that would have been, 68 is said it was moving. So
Well, 68, so I don't know if they moved in 68, but 68 is when they kind of negotiated with the county to get the building. I know by 1971, they had the museum set up out there. Like that's the year the first Harvest
and
Festival
that sounds
was.
about right because he would pick my younger sister and me up. And I remember saying, "Oh, Kate can help me," and she was more of the artistic kind of all over the map kind of person. And he went, "Oh no! Only I could touch that glassware," but he had her setting up cases and displays.
Mhm.
And one of the funny memories I have is my younger sister and I walked over to Fuzzy Randolph was setting up the
Absolutely.
Indians at thing, and
So you'll be happy to
Yeah.
know that for many, many years, that Native American display was largely disassembled and was put elsewhere in the building. A few years ago, it's not exactly like Fuzzy set it up, but it's back in the same place with a lot of the same stuff out, because that's an amazing collection there. Now,
Yeah.
back then they had human remains out.
Yeah.
Obviously can't do that
Not
anymore,
now.
but
Well, I have a very weird sense of humor. My mother had to have a front tooth removed, and she was waiting for the bridge, whatever you call.
Partial.
And I remember walking up to him. I'd never met him before. And he said, I asked him, "Are you an archaeologist?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I've never met an archaeologist." So we all shook hands, my sister. And then
There you go.
he gave me a few teeth so I could take home and tell my mother I had brought her some teeth, to solve her problem.
so
They were-
let me tell you a funny story. You do you know the case I'm talking about where he had that Native American display?
Vaguely, it's so long ago. Yeah.
It's the biggest case right there in the main hall. That Native American display was in there for many, many, many years. And at the bottom of it, it has drawers. And some of the stuff that was in those drawers, I don't think had been touched since the 60s or 70s. I'm sure of it. In one of those drawers, we actually found an entire bag, like a quart-sized bag of human teeth.
Of teeth.
Yeah.
I knew you'd appreciate
Yeah.
that.
The room
Whatever.
that the broad axis were set up in back after.
Now, I don't know what room you're talking about.
Yeah, it was on the first floor to the left.
Okay, so that would have probably been down the west wing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Weimer Cooper and I set that room up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We were his staff, I guess. Moved.
Yeah.
Set up that.
And back when I was in my 20s, they had a fashion show,
Mhm.
and I was conned into wearing knickers. And Joe Cook was the escort, and he escorted me out.
Oh, I forgot now.
Oh,
Sorry.
my.
I was
Oh, wow.
they dressed me as a flapper. I had a
Yeah.
velvet and I had beads and
That was
yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Did you wear clothing from the museum's collection? Because I found outfits like that.
Well, there was I don't know where it is, if we even have it anymore, but there's I don't know if the piano's still there, a big old piano. Remember that piano?
So we have several
Oh,
pianos. I
piano,
would
yeah.
say the piano you're talking about, it's a big flat piano that
Yeah.
came from Waynesburg University.
Could have been. It was in like a front parlor. It seemed.
Yes, it's not in the front parlor anymore, but we still have that piano.
I was skinny enough in those days that I put on a two-piece. It was a skirt and then a top, but I was tall, so I was scrunched down because there was some waist showing, and I was seated at that piano, so they could.
I did want to add another thing, just remembering Josephine, she was quite
Mhm.
instrumental in all this. She paid to pick up the museum when we moved. It was $1.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was part of the deal with the county. Yeah,
That's right.
we still have to pay that $1 every year.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right, I'm not from around here.
Mhm.
So where was the original museum?
So you guys would probably be able to answer that better than me. I know it was in the basement of the Long Building, but I'll be brutally honest with you, I don't know which building's the Long
Is
Building.
that Washington?
Oh, I know
Street?
where
Is
the
that
Long
Long-
Building is.
Yeah.
Oh, underneath the Hillcrest
Yeah,
shops?
it was like 2 doors up from where the barber shop.
Okay, do you know where the
Yeah.
county office
Yeah,
building
yeah,
is?
I know
It's-
where that is.
Yeah, down
Now,
that
the next thing is, okay,
Is that
the
Morgan?
poorhouse
Um,
people go over to the Curry home.
Mhm.
Then all of them went over.
It looks like it, yeah. Now, by the time that happened, there were very, very few people living over there, probably less than 40. And I do not, off the top of my head, know what the capacity of the Curry home was. However, I've been in that building, and it is way bigger than it looks. In fact, don't quote me on this. And if anybody in the room knows differently, please correct me. But I believe the people that own that building now told me that the capacity was like around 128. But I could be wrong. But having been in that building, that's definitely a realistic number.
Now, the Curry home was for anybody or people who.
So the
were
Curry
low
home,
income?
it was designed, I think, if I remember correctly, the original name was the Curry Memorial Home for the Aged or something like that. It was for older people, theoretically, yes. And again, by the time that the county home closed, it was basically only housing. It had basically become a nursing home. And the same kind of people that the Curry home was designed for were the type of people that were living at the county home by that time. Now, with that being said, I'm sure some of them were probably people that had been there for maybe 40, 50 years. I know in the 1940s, there were still people living there that had been there for a very long time. In fact, again, that family of idiots in the Ledger, they lived there for a few generations. Like they came there in the I think late 1860s, sometime early on. And they still had people living there well into the 1930s. So a few generations of that family lived there. So I'm sure when it closed, it's very likely that there could have been people that had been there for 30, 40 years that ended up moving over to Curry home.
The reason I find that interesting is I'm from Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Where I lived, half a block down and on the alley behind my house was Mary Slaughter's aged colored women's home.
Oh.
And that was always, as a kid, they were on rocking chairs, and we would stop and talk.
Yeah.
And anyway, then of course it became illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And so they tore it down and they put in something else. But I mean, now I don't know whether I guess doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
What color you are, or if you're a male or a female.
Yeah.
But anyway, now the Curry, again, and I was here when the Curry home, it's so suddenly the Curry home closes and we open up nursing homes.
I believe the Curry home, did it close in 2001?
It was whenever Cumberledge was commissioner, wasn't it?
See, I can't.
Because they built the one behind it, and there was some kind of labor dispute,
Yes.
and the county got out of
Yes.
nursing care. And
Yes.
It
It was let's say it was between like 95 and 2001 that happened. Does that sound right, Kevin?
yeah.
Because I know, I think I was in high school. I'm showing how young I am. I think I was in high school when that closed, and I graduated in 2000. So maybe the late 90s.
Yeah, that's right. Because I worked for the county for a while. That's when I started, and I can't remember her first name. Crumwine was one of the commissioners.
Barry.
Yeah, thanks. And one of the reasons people said she didn't get reelected was because she ticked off the union vote when they shut the place down.
I'll tell you what, that's a neat building there.
Yeah.
I got to go through it with one of the present owners now just a few months ago. I had been in, most of that building is abandoned. The one wing, the business that's there now operates out of, and it's in pretty good shape, but it is a neat building to go in and see now. It's not in the greatest shape. They've had the roofs replaced, but that roof over there, you can tell, leaked for many, many, many years. But it is definitely a neat building.
So unlike the museum, they aren't restoring.
They are. We have the luxury of being able to get grants.
Yeah.
And we're a historic site. They don't have that luxury. So any work they do, they have to pay for. You know what I mean? So, but they did replace, I think they replaced the roof on the entire building. I know they kind of did it in sections. And the daughter of one of the owners has, by herself, very slowly been working on the portico in front there where you can drive around. It's going to be a project, but she's slowly been kind of working on that, and baby steps. It's stuff like that's expensive. Like the roof on our building we're starting to have some problems with it where it leaks, and we're getting estimates to repair the roof. Everybody's saying it's better to just replace it. And that's an astronomical figure. And our building isn't nearly as large as the roof is on the Curry home. And I would hate to know what that cost over there. So.
I painted that roof along with John Conaway.
Oh. God bless you.
Yeah.
You could not
We were
get
there
me
for a while.
up on that for all the money in the world, but I don't do heights. So.
Back to when it was the poorhouse. Now, I assume they had pretty good meals because they did farming and gardening.
It depends. Actually, in that packet I gave you there from the 1930s is a list of recipes that they used there. So you can see some of those exact things they were eating.
Now, how about clothing? Did they buy clothing for the people there?
Both. In the 19th century, it looks like they made a lot of clothing in houses or in-house. I've seen very few expenses for clothing, although there were some, but I think a lot of it was made in-house, especially dresses for the women. We do know that in the 1930s, when the WPA, the Works Progress Administration was the thing, they were making clothing to donate out there. We actually still have, they're in literal bales tied up with baler's twine of dresses that were made for the female inmates out there. And we have several on display as well. They're very basic dresses, but nice looking though, very presentable.
If you check the like newspapers.com, the digitized Republicans, they have a list of the clothing that was made both
Yes.
at the children's
Yes.
home and the
Yeah, we actually have that. I think the newspapers were getting that stuff directly out of the expense ledgers, because I'm not comparing a lot of them, but yeah, it's
the,
this exact same stuff.
It's
Yeah.
the county audit. It's
Yep.
whatever after it's been reviewed
Yep.
and everything, and everybody signed off.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. You talked about food and of course shelter and clothing. What about education? Did the children there have any opportunities?
It's definitely not in the 19th century that is specifically mentioned. I have heard stories that after the turn of the century, early 1900s, some of the children that may have been there did go to Colic school.
COVID.
Yeah. And again, in the 19th century, I've seen a couple mentions where it says they didn't go to church, but that may have been simply it wasn't practical to get to any of them. But I'm sure some of them probably did too. I know after the 1900s, some of the people that lived there were allowed to, I don't want to say freely go about, but I know some walked into town. If anyone knows Don Wilson, he has told me stories about talking to guys that used to sit on the courthouse wall and various things like that. So it wasn't a prison environment. Certainly not. At some points in time, it may have gravitated more towards that, but I think a lot of that was more on an individual basis too. Like if you needed to be locked up, you probably were. If you weren't, you probably weren't.
The reason I asked, you said there were young children, whether they had had a chance to learn to even read and write.
I would say at best it was minimal.
No, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, at best it was probably minimal. Anyone else? All right, well, you guys have been great. You've asked many good questions, and I like that. It makes it more interesting, I think, for everybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with
Very
that,
nice.
ooh, and I almost filled the hour out perfectly. And with that, I'm going home.
Do you happen to have a spare one of these?
Yeah.
You could.
Oh, I can take yours.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I have a. Maybe I
Miss
don't.
Miss Fanning hired our older sister right after she finished college with a librarian degree.
Mhm.
She cataloged the
I
library.
Oh.
I can give you one of ours. We have.
We,
Okay, thank you, Jay.
she's retired now, of course. I thought we all wanted to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
If you need an arm, let me know.
Okay.
There's so many